So this session today is going to be led by Ms. Emily Campbell, Ms. Lanisha Simmons, Dr. Isidore Rudnick, and Dr. Dawn Williams. So Emily Campbell is the Director of Curriculum and Instruction for Cincinnati Public Schools. She took on the charge of Unbound Ed and spearheaded the efforts in adopting a curriculum through there. We also have Lanisha Simmons is the ELA Curriculum Manager for 7th through 12th grade at Cincinnati Public Schools. In her work, she co-led the CPS TV project, which was a way for students and families to engage in learning from the comfort of their homes. Dr. Rudnick is currently serving as the Fine and Performing Arts Curriculum Manager for Cincinnati Public Schools. He is a nationally recognized arts administrator, music educator, composer and arranger, jazz trombonist, and conductor. Dr. Williams is the Curriculum Manager of Mathematics with Cincinnati Public Schools. She led the K-12 curriculum adoption, the Distance Learning Summer Program, and co-founded the Justice in the Details podcast. So Ms. Campbell, Ms. Simmons, Dr. Rudnick, and Dr. Williams, welcome to the Fellow Summit, and thank you so much for sharing with us today.
Thank you for having us. So we are excited to be here. It's hard to believe though, we're session 12. We're gonna have to bring the energy today. We have really backwards mapped our journey from last year to this year and want to share 3 key messages with you. Before I go into those, this is a journey and we have learned over and over again that the more engaged we are with our families and with our students around changes and ideas and needs, the better those changes are. So 3 key messages that we want to share with you is around equity and what we have learned from using an equity statement, that families have to be our partners in this work. In a world where we have to pivot quickly between distance and face-to-face and possibly blended, families as partners is the only way to go. And having to pivot quickly and efficiently is incredibly crucial. So these color codes actually do mean something. As we share our story, we've color coded the different things that we learned along the way in relationship to our equity statement, our families as partners, and being able to pivot quickly. So our first person who's going to share is kind of what we learned in March and April when COVID became a very real thing in the state of Ohio and made us move from a 5-day face-to-face instructional model to a stay at home. The physical buildings are closed, distance delivery model. So Ms. Lanisha Simmons is going to share this part.
Yes, thank you. So as Emily shared, we are going to share our journey through this pandemic and how we kept families engaged. So we're going to begin our journey in March and April and what that looks like. So March, it all begins. I think we all can think about where we were when we heard the announcement that schools would be going to 100% remote. So of course, we know Governor DeWine makes the announcement that schools are going to remote learning. So as a district and as a curriculum office, we immediately began to think about the weight that this would put on our students and families. We knew that not only would we need to pivot quickly, but our families also needed to pivot quickly. So that meant all hands on deck for us. So all hands on deck for our department and our team. So we called in our instructional coaches, we called in all curriculum managers, and even teachers. So we called everyone in to support one another in creating our remote learning package. So our remote learning package, we were I'm fortunate to be able to create learning packets for students pre-K through 12th grade. Because of bringing all hands on deck, these packets included all content areas. So from math to science, to ELA, and even fine art, we knew it was important for our students to be able to engage in their learning regardless of circumstances. So whether they had a computer or didn't have a computer, we wanted to make sure they could stay engaged in their learning. But of course, you continue to learn throughout the process. So for those families that, because it was a quick pivot, for those families that could not pick up packets, we created small hubs around the city for families to come and pick up their remote learning packets in order for their students to continue to engage in their learning. Now, of course, we also understood that education is not the only thing that that schools provide for families, which led to Cincinnati Public Schools launching our CPS United campaign, which was all about collaboration and caring. So this included our 24 meal distribution sites. So anyone under the age of 18 could come to one of those sites and receive a meal. Because again, the quick pivot was we knew that with families having to pivot, we wanted to support them as best that we can. Also during this process, and this is all still March, also during this process, it was very important for us to stay connected to our families. We wanted to hear from them. We wanted to hear directly from them to know what our next steps should be to support them. So we partnered with a group called Cohere, and we created parent focus groups. And those focus groups gave us the information that we needed to know what our next steps should be, from printing support or devices, meals, whatever parents needed to share. We made sure that we heard directly from them to determine our next steps. So March was a busy month, but a lot of great things came out of March and practices that we are continuing now. So April, as we continue to, I don't want to say adjust to the pandemic, but we continue to learn more through each day, we had an amazing opportunity. So we were able to launch CPS TV in April with a collaboration with our community access channel here in Cincinnati. Even in the midst of everything, it was exciting for us to be able to do this. It came from the question, how can we continue to engage our families and students even though they are not in the building or in the classroom, and even outside of our remote learning package? So we wanted to ensure that we could keep our students engaged in learning regardless of circumstances. Our CPS TV had daily themes. Those daily themes included literacy around the world, so that focused on social studies content as well as ELA content and much more. And then we had our STEAM days, so of course science and technology and math. And then Fun Friday. Fun Friday included tours of the Cincinnati Zoo and the Cincinnati Museum Center. So all of our content was created by our awesome teachers, and we were able to partner with some amazing groups throughout the state. So some of our partners I want to call out included the Cincinnati Museum Center, the University of Cincinnati, the CPS Health Gap, Ohio State University with the Extension Program, the 4-H Youth Program, and of course, as I mentioned earlier, the Cincinnati Zoo. So CPS TV was such a success for our families and students that we have actually continued it throughout this school year to continue to engage our students and families. So March and April, again, were very busy months full of pivoting quickly, but some great things also came out of those 2 months at the beginning of the pandemic. So moving on to May and June.
And Dr. Rudnick is going to share some of the big learnings from May and June.
So in May, we rolled out our CPS Distinguished Educator Program. And this was a 4-stage training program for every educator in Cincinnati public schools, including principals and teachers and staff and curriculum managers. It was conducted on our LMS, our learning management system, which is Schoology. And by the start of our remote instruction, we had an incredibly high participation rate. We were in the high 90s. And what this Distinguished Educator Program focused on was providing accelerated learning for our students instead of remedial learning. And every step of the way in the Distinguished Educator Program, we were and continue to be focused on meeting the needs of every child in CPS, regardless of their circumstances or the learning environment in which we are teaching in. And that program has really proved to be incredibly successful. The other student-focused project that we did in May was the Senior Legends Project. We wanted to give our CPS seniors an opportunity to creatively and artistically share their thoughts on how they were feeling in this incredibly unique time of history during this global pandemic. So students submitted visual art, music performances, compositions, poetry, spoken word, raps, and all of this very personally expressing their feelings and emotions about how they felt and thought and were coping with this global pandemic. As we moved to June, we wanted to highlight 2 important celebrations. The first one, of course, was our class of 2020 graduation. Even though we could not hold normal in-person graduation ceremonies, we did a quick pivot, which seems to be the kind of earmark of this whole period that we find ourselves in. And we created a series of graduation parades so that our students could safely, in their cars, do a processional at our different high school sites and have an opportunity for socially distanced staff to celebrate their amazing accomplishment. And these graduations were aired via CPS TV so that our families continue and can continue to celebrate this very important time in our students' lives. The next celebration that we want to highlight is we wanted to provide an artistic event that any CPS student could at least participate in. And we chose to focus on our Cincinnati Public School Jazz Academy. And we did a socially distanced live stream concert with professional musicians. And we live streamed it out on the CPS YouTube channel. And the focus of that concert was honoring the music and lives of 6 great Black artists of the 20th century. They were Bessie Smith, Mary Lou Williams, Duke Ellington, Charlie Parker, Wes Montgomery, and Sonny Rollins. and students in grades 4th through 12th throughout the district were able to jump on to YouTube Live. They were able to see the performance. They were able to communicate, ask questions, make comments, and it really did open up a new kind of communication avenue for us. Thank you.
And Dr. Williams is going to share our big learnings from our summer work.
Thank you, Emily. Lanisha talked about our focus was to keep our students and families engaged regardless of circumstance. And from an equity lens, we wanted to ensure that all of our parents and families had continued access throughout the summer. In addition, from our family groups that Lanisha talked about, we heard loud and clear that our families wanted consistency throughout the district as it related to teaching and learning. And they also wanted their students to continue to grow and learn. So what did we do? In order to ensure that our students could continue to grow and learn, we quickly pivoted from a traditional summer learning and developed our remote summer learning program, where our 9th through 12th grade students had an opportunity to recover their credits so that we can ensure that they will be able to graduate with their peers. Our families also voiced their need for students to be heard. They wanted their students to be heard, and they wanted them to have an opportunity to share their experience in this new learning environment. So we developed student surveys. During our remote summer learning, our students took these surveys weekly, and also our teachers shared their experience through survey as well. Some of the data that we collected was powerful. We were able to identify those best practices that were best for our students in this new learning environment. And you will hear how this has impacted our new mission of accelerated learning. We continue the support of our students throughout the summer with our weekly meal distributions. In March, Lanisha talked about all hands on deck, and all hands on deck just didn't mean teaching and learning, but we wanted to support our entire students and families. So we continue with our weekly meal distributions, and also in preparation for the upcoming school year, we continued our device pickup program. So as a result of the focus groups with our parents, all hands on deck from students, teachers, and everybody who supports the work in CPS, our mission was to accelerate learning for every student for the upcoming school year. So how does this look? We have three big components and three key areas around accelerated learning. Our first is our accelerated learning for our educators guide, which provides our educators instructional strategies and interventions to support the advanced learning of our students who have unfinished learning, and it helps them identify those critical prerequisites that will allow students to perform at grade level. So our focus was all of our students are going to be growing. The second guide is called our Student Success in Distance Learning. We wanted our students to know what the expectations were for distance learning and how that looks in our Cincinnati Public Schools environment. It also has answers to common questions and who they can contact if they need additional support. Our third guide is our family guide. And what we heard from our focus groups from our families is that although they want students to learn and grow, they wanted to know what did they expect, how could they support their students, and any additional information who would make this learning process a little better. So we created the Family Guide to Student Success, and I think they're putting the links of those guides in the chat. And that Family Guide focuses on how to stay connected with CPS and understanding our new distance learning environment.
So this has been a journey. Our equity statement that every child has, regardless of circumstances, receives high quality on grade level curriculum and instruction and technologies was magnified as a result of the pandemic. And we were able to quickly see where we needed to support our families. We were able to get Wi-Fi devices. It helped us slow down and do those focus groups with families to hear from them, from their perspective, when their children are at home learning what is the best scenario. And we were able to use that information to pivot quickly and create guides and resources to support students, families, and educators. We are still on this journey. We are still learning what works and what we can improve. And we now have these structures in place where we can get voice from students and families to be a part of those solutions. So that concludes our presentation for today. We wanted to give some time for question and answers if people had any for our team.
I haven't received any in the chat, but please, again, first of all, thank you so much for taking your time to present and to share all of your successes with us. If there are any questions, we'd be happy to take them in the chat, and we can pass them along. While we're waiting for some of the questions to come through, I also wanted to share that we have a, kind of on a separate note, we have a survey that we are asking for the participants in the summit to fill out. So before you wrap up for today, please take some time to fill out the survey. That'll really help us to prepare for future summits. Are there any other questions coming through? Not yet. So we do have one question so far. What has been the best way for your team has been able to listen to families this school year?
That's a great question, and I'll let the team expand if they think I'm missing something. But over the summer, we started a student survey for our children taking summer school that ask questions like, do you know what's expected of you? Do you have what you need? Do you know how you're progressing? Do you feel connected to the learning community? And so we had some great learnings from that. We were able to support teachers differently from what kids were saying. And we are going to, we're using that survey now with our broader group of 3rd through 12th grade for distance learning. We also have continued to host town halls for families to ask questions about, well, what does this board decision mean about doing 5 weeks of distance learning? What does this mean that we might possibly do blended?
Great, thank you. There's a few other questions. Another question, I think in regard to that survey, was that a high yield for the student survey?
By high yield, do they mean like in regards to the information we learned from the survey?
I'm not 100% sure, go ahead.
To which I would say that is a high yield. We've tried to get better at asking our students for feedback around our instruction. We do that we're trying to make it a common practice when we finish a cycle of learning to say what worked well to help you learn the intended outcome, just in general, like in class, and where would you want to improve. The student survey gives it is a little more individualized, and students, from what we could tell, were a little more comfortable sharing how things were going because it was anonymous. We didn't go back to the teacher and say like, here, this child said this, but we could share instead patterns with them.
There's another question about assessments. So what assessments are you using to determine learning achievement?
We have adopted the use of NWEA MAP, which is a norm referenced assessment for math and ELA that we administer 3 times a year in kindergarten through our 9th grade courses. We also have adopted new curriculums in ELA and math and have set up bi-weekly assessment data points that allow us to know on a more frequent basis how our students are doing, which then allows us to address unfinished learning more proactively.
Another question I'm seeing is, how did you connect with families that might have been a little bit more difficult to reach?
Great question. Does the team want to respond, or do you want me to just keep going? You want to add?
I can respond to that one. In cases of families that were difficult to reach, oftentimes we actually had to go visit their apartment or where they were living and get materials to them. We also were able to connect with them when we provided weekly lunches and dinners at the different sites throughout the city. That was an excellent opportunity to make sure that we could get important information to hard to reach families during the exchange of the lunches and the dinners that were provided for them.
And then I would just like to add, we have a system now in place. So if a child is not engaged during the school day, by then teachers, reading specialists, people will call them. If a child hasn't been reached after 3 times of a teacher trying to reach out, our social workers then start to go and visit homes and figure out different ways to reach out.
Great. It looks like we have 2 more questions in the chat, about 2 more minutes left. So the first question is, how is instruction for students with disabilities tailored to meet their individual needs without losing access to the general education?
I can't tell if Dawn was coming up. So we have a department that's dedicated to diverse learners in CPS, and their team works collectively with families and specialized units. They also work to tailor to meet the individual needs. I can tell you it's very difficult in the distance model. They've had several iterations of how to best support diverse learners. And there is conversation about how do we transition, especially our specialized units, so that they receive more face-to-face instruction. Dawn, did you want to add to that?
Yes, I just wanted to piggyback on that in regards to inclusion in the general education class. We have amazing educators in our district who really have leaned into differentiation. And with our newly adopted curriculum in ELA and mathematics, the curriculum, when it was selected, we want to make sure that they had those tools to support teachers with that. And so they also have support from our Department of Student Services to make sure that we are, and especially through an equity lens, making sure that everyone has access to grade level work. And we just provide those necessary scaffolds of support so they have access.
Thank you. So the last question, sorry, I don't want to impose too much more on your time. It's already 2:30, but if anyone has a quick answer for this one, it's how do you communicate assessments to families?
So we launch all of our instruction from our learning management platform, which is Schoology. And so any information in regards to weekly updates, assessments, that is posted in Schoology. Also for our MAP assessment, we have done robocalls, we have sent emails, and we have also sent out letters to keep families informed on when that's taking place and the next steps for those things. So we use all of our communication resources in order to communicate to families.
Great, thank you so much. So once again, thank you very much, Ms. Campbell, Ms. Simmons, Dr. Rudnick, Dr. Williams, for sharing your time and knowledge with us today. And everyone, please join me in thanking them in the chat.